Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to everyone. My name is Amie Nikam. I am the current president of Sonoma County NOW, which stands for the National Organization for Women, in case you weren't sure. We are part of a huge organization that has some 250,000 members in it. And we're one of just hundreds of chapters around the country in all 50 states and the DC as well. And we stand for women's rights. We stand also for human rights. And we are always looking for new members. So you don't have to be female or identify as female to join it. We are happy to have everyone. In fact, the more supporters we can get, the better for women's rights and human rights. So I'd like to introduce you, first of all, to our three candidates. Actually, before I do that, I want to introduce you to our board. Right now we have Elaine B. Holtz, who was the prior president for several years and who is our current treasurer. We have Rebecca, who is our current newsletter editor and secretary. And I just introduced myself, Amie Nikam, as the president. So it's we're always looking for more people on our board. Now I will turn the meeting over to our candidates, our three candidates. We have Amie Carter, who comes to us from the, currently is the Assistant Superintendent of Education Services for Marin County Office of Education. She was the former Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Innovation at the Novato Unified School District. You may remember her from being principal at Rancho Cotati High School for 4 years. She was principal at Thomas Page Academy for a year. And before that, she was in the Central Valley in both Ripon and, in Ripon. She also taught for a while at Stanislaus. So that's Amie. And we have Brad Coscarelli right now, he attended the University of California at Irvine, where he received his bachelor's degree in history and his teaching credential. He also has both an administrative credential and a master's degree in educational leadership from Sonoma State University. He first taught in Cupertino for a few years before moving to Sonoma County for the rest of his career. He was a teacher for 10 years at Slater Middle School, then 15 years at Santa Rosa High School, first as administrator, and then spent 8 years as principal. Currently, Brad is principal of Hidden Valley Elementary School in Santa Rosa. And finally, we have Ron Meza Calloway, who worked as an elementary school teacher and principal before taking on administrative leadership roles with Santa Rosa City Schools. He has served for over 10 years as the superintendent of the Mark West School District, leading our community and educational landscape as it has changed dramatically between fires, floods, and now the pandemic. So I hope you'll all welcome heartily these three candidates with me. And Amie, Brad, Ron, I didn't ask who wanted to start first, but why don't we start with Brad and just tell a little bit more about yourselves, what you want our audience to know tonight.
Sure, I'd be happy to start. Well, first, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for holding this forum. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to be able to share my vision and my goals for our schools in Sonoma County. I've made it very clear that I have three main priorities. The first is to put students first, and that to me means all students by getting funding into the classroom where it's needed and belongs. I've also talked about a second priority, which is fiscal management and oversight, along with consolidation. And I've always said you can't talk about the first, putting students first, without talking about fiscal management and the idea of consolidating some of our 40 school districts in Sonoma County. And then third, of course, my other priority is to attract and retain the very best school employees, not just teachers, but school employees and administrators for all of our schools.
Sit down.
Our students need it, our students deserve it, our families need it. And I would do this through competitive wages, but also we have an amazing junior college. We have an amazing Sonoma State, and we have a program that already exists at SCO, and we could build upon our own. We have children here in Sonoma County that already have deep roots, that know our community. And if they are interested in becoming a school employee, a teacher, great. We need to have the means through those institutions and SCO to get them into public education. So once again, I'm honored to be here, and thank you for hosting this forum tonight.
Thank you, Brad. Amie, would you like to go next?
Thank you so much. So I think this is such a critical time for us in education. Really coming out of this pandemic, we have seen just the inequities that we're already so aware of really laid bare. We had students who did well during the pandemic and learned, and they had certain resources in their homes. And then we saw kids who really struggled and who really suffered without the resources that schools provide and that we're able to provide to help them be successful. At the same time, we've just seen our educators do the most amazing, innovative things. They had to get incredibly creative in order to reach through to students and make sure to continue their learning. And so I want to take advantage of both of those things. I really want to take our county and make sure the focus is on equity and making sure that students have what they need and that household resources are not the determining factor in their outcomes. And also focus on that innovation and that creativity. We questioned so much about education during the pandemic. We questioned grading and bell schedules and all kinds of things. And I think we need to continue that questioning and come back from this pandemic, building our schools in new ways and really taking the time to question everything. I've got three areas of focus for me that are my priorities. The first is safety. We need to do everything we can, no matter what the world throws at us, to keep our children where they belong, which is in schools, and making sure that they are safe for students. And that means more than their health. That also means their mental health. And we really need to create spaces that have wellness centers and help equip our educators, better equip our educators to support students' mental health. The second is access. I really believe that we should be diversifying the teacher pipeline. There's such great research that shows that when we have just one educator of color on campus, it changes the outcomes, not only for our BIPOC students, but for all students. And I think we should be out there recruiting the BIPOC educators. And part of that is making sure that we have teacher housing available. As we recruit these educators, we've got to make sure that they can start their lives here in Sonoma and have a quality roof over their head. I'm someone who benefited from a program like that in my own education, and it's one that I want to continue to make sure blossoms here in Sonoma County. And the last one is opportunity. I believe that we need to continue to look at students their senior year and making sure that they have access to college and to career pathways and the opportunity for internships. I believe that senior year is a space we can really focus on their passions and create new pathways for them. Women's issues are my issues. I'm the mother of 5 daughters, so I'm incredibly passionate about this. And I think we're all aware that this is a race that if a woman won, it would be the first time in about 100 years. So I'm focused on getting that representation. That's a big part of why I'm running. I think it's time to change that for our county and get a female voice in that critical office. So it's a great privilege to be here with you tonight.
Thank you, Amie. And Ron.
Thank you. Well, I'm focused on equity and
making sure we target specific areas. When we look at a portrait of Sonoma County, we can already identify areas where we need to put our resources in. They've been identified actually 10 years ago or in 2014 at the last portrait of Sonoma County, and again at this portrait of Sonoma County in 2022. Literally, nothing has changed. So therefore, we know where our resources and our efforts need to be to help with that equity and social growth for our students. It is imperative that we go and target those areas for our children. I have three major areas that I want to focus on as a superintendent of the county. Number one, the social and emotional health of our children, along with the academics. Since 2017, during the fire, then we had after that, we had the smoke from the Paradise Fire, the Kincaid Fire, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. Our children have had not a single normal school year since 2017. We must address their emotional, social needs first. Then we can address academic needs, because that need of being on a campus and feeling safe has to be identified. We must put in trauma-informed educational points. We must work with Measure O on that, which is a countywide initiative for mental health. Next, we need to focus on reading. We need to have all of our students reading by the end of third grade year. That means that they would have the ability to work with complex text, to think deeply about subjects. Because we go from kindergarten to third grade learning to read, and then from fourth grade on, we're reading to learn. And if we have that ability, we have the pathways are endless for us. But it goes all the way back to when we're 2 years of age, because we have children, as we mentioned in the portrait of Sonoma County, who do not come from resources, rich literature resources. We need to provide those with our nonprofits, with our preschools, with all the resources we can, so that when they enter kindergarten, we do not have a 1 million word gap, which is insignificant for our children. The other part of being able to read by the time you're in third grade is then when you get into high school, you can attack A through G curriculum, which is a pathway that you can take if you want to go off to college, or even if you want to go into a career, that it's all available to you. Finally, I just really want to focus on what it looks like from 7 through 12 curriculum. We have students who go 20% who get the red carpet treatment. They're going to college and they're going to do fine. But we have another 40–50% of our children who are not engaged with school starting in the 7th grade. We have to rethink what those classrooms look like, how we can engage our students with rich curriculum that is life learning, meaning they're in their community, they're working, whether it's with water resources for climate change, whether it's with urban interface, with fires that we're dealing with, all those pieces that will mean something to them. Thank you.
Great, thank you to all three of you. I'd like now to start with the question portion, and we have some questions already that I will ask for each of you, and you'll get 90 seconds to speak, and when you have, I guess, 30 seconds left, I'll hold up a piece of paper that looks like the portrait of Sonoma County, in fact. So you'll know. Ron, since you just had a turn, you went last, this time you get to go first. So please tell us what environmental improvements you will make, both in curriculum and in school infrastructure and transportation.
Well, we would work with, we had Prop 39 on, this is going to be with facilities, with climate change, working on recreating wind. That's a finance that we can use to recreate windows with electrical and AC units, those pieces on that. With the educational piece though, we're looking to create pathways for our students, like I mentioned, in water resources, especially because of our drought issues, urban interface, that piece. Transportation is, I belong to the West County JPA. I've been past president for 2 years on that board. And what we've done the West County, it's a joint powers authority, and it incorporates many school districts, including Santa Rosa City Schools, Pioneer, all of that, West County, and many more. And so what we've done is we've repurchased buses for climate purposes. We have restructured how our routes are. One of the big issues we face, though, is making sure our routes are a little bit clearer because of the time. If we can get those pieces down, that would even reduce the carbon footprint that we have in our area. And that's the areas of transportation that we really need to look at as a community, working together. Obviously, we would love to have more people walking and riding their bikes to school. We do have that in our community. We have a program where we have students, it's called Rock and Roll, where they come to school on their bikes or they walk to school in big units coming to all of our campuses. And we can promote that as well. That's a Sonoma County initiative that's been out there for many years. But if we can continue to promote that, getting people out of their cars and onto the walkway so we can, again, reduce our carbon footprint.
Great, thank you, Ron. Brad, your turn.
Thank you, Amy. This is something near and dear to my heart. Environmentalism, climate change. It's something I take seriously, and I live and breathe it every day. I've always taught my own children, my 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. I've always taught them this, and I've always taught my students to reduce and reuse and recycle. You know, as county superintendent, I will work on student transportation. You heard about West County buses, and the great majority of them, over 165 or so of the 170 are still diesel. And it's a huge pollutant, and we have to work on that. We need to move to a more environmentally friendly transportation system, not just for school buses, but with electric cars for all of our districts, even electric trucks now for our maintenance yards. I will be sure to promote solar power and wind power, and make sure that all of our 40 districts follow suit. I emphasize going green, and to me, it's a huge, huge issue that we can teach our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
So I currently work at a county office of education, and the county offices are really formed to accomplish two main tasks. First of all, county offices oversee budgets, and secondary, we step in if a school struggles with some of their state indexes, tardies, academic growth, those kinds of things. There's really not anything that exists in statute that would give my office a broad range of authority in things like facilities, transportation. We do some support work in curriculum, especially if a district is struggling that way. But that's really outside of statute for the county office. I wish I got to call those shots. But the state of California, we operate on something called the local control policy. And what this means is that our local districts are really the individuals and your local elected officials. They really get to make decisions about facilities, about transportation. Your school board gets to help select the curriculum. So while I would certainly play a role in things like ethnic studies and creating awareness, helping districts acquire curriculum, a lot of this, I'm afraid, is a little bit outside of what legislative statute lays out for our county office of education. Like my colleagues, I definitely share the commitment to the environment. That's definitely where we want to see things go. But I just want to be clear about the role of the superintendent of the county office.
Great, thank you all 3. Next question is, how would you use your role as county superintendent to deal with 2 major problems we face, the climate crisis and political threats to democracy? Amy, why don't you start?
So just kind of stepping off of the statutes that define the role of county office. Again, it's a office that focuses on the budgetary element, making sure that none of our districts get in over their heads on any of their debts that they take on, and that they remain solvent. And then intervening if a district ever struggles to make certain academic outcomes. So beyond that, really, the opportunity that the county office has around issues like climate and saving our democracy is really focused on education, on quality education, on education that is representative of the students that are in the classroom, curriculum that adheres to science and that makes it very clear where we are on issues like climate change. I continue to tell people that there are two things that will save our democracy that I have hope in, and that is a free press and our educational environments. This is really how we're preparing our leaders for the future to address these challenges. And so we have to make sure that our curriculum prepares them for what's in store, both with climate change and with being well acquainted with history and how important it is that we retain free speech and other elements of our democracy. So my role really is one of influence and of giving voice to that. And I would definitely take advantage of every opportunity to do so.
Great, thank you very much. Brad?
Hi, Amy, thank you. I want to clarify a couple of things. Earlier at the last, on the last question, we talked about transportation. And just to clarify, the Sonoma County Office of Ed and the superintendent does have control over West County. We overlook their budgets. So that's how we have immediate impact on the buses that are purchased and environmental action. I consider myself an activist. I'm very vocal. And so as county superintendent, you would have a very vocal superintendent for the environment. In addition to that, the second part of this question, you talk about political threats to democracy. And we see this every single day in the news and over the media. And to me, the most important part of this is to teach children critical thinking. They have to understand that anything and everything they see on a screen is not necessarily true. They have to understand how to make decisions for themselves. So that is really the best support we can give our students to keep this amazing democracy of ours going strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Ron? You're muted.
That would be nice. I'm better when I'm muted. Anyway, when we look at the climate crisis, we know that, especially I look at it from the Tubbs Fire perspective, what occurred and how we need to interface with our urban interface with fire. We need to create classes for our students with career technical education that goes into that realm, that supports their learning, because they're the generation that's going to have the most impact on what happens to us in the future. And so what we end with water resources, we work with Sonoma County Water Agency to create pathways, internships into those places with those things. Now it's an LEA that would do that, a local education authority, which is a high school or a school district, but the County Office of Education can help with the resources of creating those classes for those children. And that's really imperative for our community. We can work together on the climate change with our schools, having our children in a part of that. Political threats to democracy. Obviously, we need to continue to allow for all speech so we can hear from each other. We absolutely cannot silence people with throwing away books or banning books. There was a piece I read somewhere the other day. It was really great. We've read about over 1,000 heterosexual couples in books and books, but you throw one book about two rabbits being married and we go crazy over it. There's no sense in that. We need to hear from everybody. We need open dialogue that allows for communication. That stops a threat to democracy.
Thank you to all three of you. There's a third question here. Do you believe in promoting critical race theory tenets or the euphemisms equity, inclusion, and diversity? Are you in support of gender identity training? Although that might be a separate question, but does that make sense? Brad, would you like to start it?
Yeah, I'm laughing with you, Amy. You gave us multiple questions within the questions. I love those. So as you know, critical race theory is not taught in our schools. I think you'll hear this from the other candidates as well. We agree on that. However, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a history major. I love history. And you have to teach children about our history, our US history, and it can be ugly. It can be violent and horrifying, but we can't shy away from that. We can't sugarcoat anything. You know, I believe in inclusivity and allowing all of our students, no matter how they identify, they should be welcomed into all of our schools. So for me, it's really a simple question. Even though we don't teach critical race theory, I believe in ethnic studies, and I believe in teaching our children the real US history that we've held. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
As Brad alluded to, the critical race theory is not an adopted curriculum from the California Department of Education. So that piece is not taught. However, we do need to have discussions about how there are people who do not feel part of our community, who have been left behind. We have to make sure that we tell stories of equity and inclusion. One of the things we absolutely need to do is look at our special needs students and make sure that their faces are on in our schools, that they're being included with us, because we tend to push some people out, even if they're special needs students. They need to be with us. Diversity needs to be with us. We need to have people of color, of diversity, so that we see our faces together and we talk. Because if we don't talk to one another, we continue to go into our separate silos. You can see that in when we went back earlier about our political threats to democracy, is because we are now going into different silos. And we can't have that. We need to come together. We need to talk about our diversity, about our differences, which is great, which makes America great. We definitely need to talk about areas where, as mentioned earlier, we've made mistakes in America, but we have to put them front and center so that we can move forward as a country and as a nation. We absolutely need to have our teachers have gender identity training. Will need to be in the forefront of professional development in our community. That can be done through the County Office of Education. We can set up trainings in those areas so we can continue that to move forward with that area.
Great, thank you, Ron. Amie?
Thanks again, third time. Let's just reiterate, California schools do not teach critical race theory. To be clear, critical race theory is a course that would be offered at law schools. It's a graduate course, and I doubt that you would find more than a handful of California educators who have ever taken a critical race theory class. You know, I am not comfortable with the embedded statement in the question that it's a euphemism for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or a euphemism for critical race theory. Equity, inclusion, and diversity are values, and there are values as a nation. And I believe that we should do everything in our power to fulfill that vision in our schools. And that looks like an inclusive place for every student. that looks like having the contributions of every race and creed in our great nation reflected in our history books and their stories told. And it's focusing on curriculum that is culturally relevant. I do not know what gender identity training is. I am never heard of that. So I'm really puzzled by that. What we do here in education is make sure that every child that comes to our schools is accepted, is comfortable, has the rights that we have in the Constitution, that all men are created equal, and that everybody has a free opportunity and to access curriculum and learning and the cultures at our school campuses. That is one of my tenets of what I want to do here in Sonoma County. I have a 90-day plan, and one of the first things I want to do is establish a diversity, equity, and inclusion team at the Sonoma County Office of Education, a team that's really focused on these issues, that a team that is there to support districts and to really set the record straight on the work that we have to do and support districts on the way forward.
Great, thank you all. Amie, I'd like to start with you on this one. Currently, State Superintendent Tony Thurmond is co-leading an ad hoc committee to ensure safer, more accessible, all-gender restrooms for LGBTQIA+ students in public schools. What are some ideas you have to help make all-gender restrooms more accessible on school campuses, and what state law or bill backs that initiative?
So several years ago, we saw gender inclusive restrooms established on all of our campuses. That was put in place by the state legislature. And we did see campuses offer gender neutral bathrooms to students. What was unfortunate was that oftentimes it was the nurse's office or a reconverted faculty room. And I think really what Tony Thurmond is working on now is to push that so that we can do even better. We have data that tells us that 45% of LGBTQI students, I+ students are saying that they are uncomfortable using the restroom at their own campus. And again, if a student is uncomfortable, if they feel unsafe or not welcome, they're going to have a hard time learning, and we have to make those spaces inclusive for them. I know that Tony Thurmond is working with the state legislature. He's hoped to have some legislation on the ballot in the fall. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that he's pushing us to do more than just get by. And I think we need to create spaces so that all our students, no matter how they identify, have the safe spaces they need.
Thank you. Brad?
I have to remember to unmute here. Well, as you heard back in 2017, it was Governor Jerry Brown at the time who was able to sign off on AB 1732. And that did give students the ability to have gender neutral, at the time, single use restrooms for all California schools. And I think all of you know now, I was the longtime principal at Santa Rosa High. And as such, we actually hit this head on much earlier than that. We were ahead of the curve. We had these bathrooms in place. I had spoken at length to students and staff and families. And we really had a family welcoming, warm atmosphere at Santa Rosa High. I had students that would travel from all over the county and even outside of the county to come to Santa Rosa High because they had been bullied or beaten up at their schools for who they identified as, and they knew that Santa Rosa High was a safe haven. So I have to give Tony Thurmond a lot of credit. I give him credit for working with Senator Connie Leyva on this, and I have to give him credit because he's also got high school students on this committee, which I truly appreciate. They need to have a voice in this as well. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Ron,
Actually, today we got an update from School and College Legal regarding bathrooms and working with students. They were referring actually to AB 1266 and Tom Mamiano, going way back, about the process through this on this. And one of the big pieces is creating safe places for bathrooms for children, making sure that we don't make the children all have access no matter what, and they don't have to share who they are in the open with the things that can be privately done so that they can use any restroom, but that doesn't have to be the process. They can use any restroom they choose and what they identify with. And that's so important because children need to feel safe. And if they feel safe in that haven, that is wonderful. What we really need to do is we've got to work with our staff on making sure we educate all our staff on what those pieces are, how we can work on them, how we can work with children to make sure they feel safe in that educational piece. And that was one of the parts with the with this from the School and College Legal, is making sure we actually put educational pieces together for our staffs so they understand how we can help best support our children. Thank you.
thank you. Now, we have 4 minutes left of the originally scheduled meeting, and I don't know that we've got anyone coming for the Spanish portion. So I'm thinking if you all don't have a problem with going on longer, that we could answer a couple more questions and maybe go until 10 till and see if anybody comes through for the Spanish portion. Because I really have 2 very good questions here and I want to make sure that they're answered. So, okay, great, thank you. So Brad, we'll start with you. Very often there is parent backlash and complaints to school administrators and teachers for teaching certain LGBTQ+ gender-related lessons in public schools. How would you explain the distinct differences between a general LGBTQ+ gender curriculum versus a sex ed curriculum to educate those parents who are complaining about this LGBTQ training?
Thank you, Amy. You know, as I mentioned in my last question, you know, at Santa Rosa High and at all the schools that I've ever been an administrator at, it really comes down to building strong relationships, to have honest and open communication with my staff, my students, and my families. And a lot of times it comes down to parents not understanding the issue. And when they come into my office, we sit down and we talk about their concerns. And I have to say, for the great majority of the time, parents leave happy and understanding of why we have certain curriculums, certain bathrooms, certain facilities in place. For me, this question is twofold. You know, when I think of sex education, it reminds me of the old-fashioned sex education that you get in 5th grade, 6th grade, all the way up through 7th and 8th, where it's more biological in nature. It's like a science class where it's anatomy and how things work. Really, for the other curriculum that you're talking about, it depends on the teacher and it depends on the department. We had many English teachers at Santa Rosa High who wanted to pick novels that addressed these issues for the LGBTQ community, and we allowed it, and it was amazing. And they had rich dialogue in the classroom on these issues. So I think it's twofold. One is more the old-fashioned biology class teacher, and the other gives a wide array of curriculum options for teachers. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Amie, how would you address them?
Yeah, I think LGBTQIA plus curriculum is kind of a red herring. That's not really where we are in education. Currently and for the past few years in our sex education, there has been part of the curriculum talks about gender fluidity, gender expression, the difference between gender assigned at birth, gender expression, gender attraction, and all those elements are already discussed in our sexual education standards. They're available online. And parents are more than welcome to review those. They've been reviewed by our California State Board and the Department of Education. So that's all there. And I think in the state of California, we embrace that is knowledge that our children needs to understand in order to thrive in a pluralistic society. These are issues core to identity, core to acceptance, and we're a society that wants to move away from the marginalization of others. And as long as that holds true, as long as that holds to be our ideals as a nation, these are conversations that must continually be had about gender expression. And so as an LGBTQ member myself, I would stand firmly in this corner and make sure that people were well informed. Parents always have the right to opt out of sex ed. That information gets sent home. That's something that they can explore. But we're not going to be doing ourselves any services or preparing students for the life to come if we begin to omit important elements in our curriculum and begin scrubbing out the contributions of important members of our society and negating them and making them feel invisible on our campus. So I would stand staunchly in the corner of making sure that all are represented in our classrooms.
I absolutely believe that we need to make sure every student is valued, no matter their background, no matter their diversity, that we bring forth children and to have self-worth to themselves and to their community. And if we don't have discussions, rich discussions, sharing that we truly believe in them, then we continue down a path we mentioned earlier about a political democracy that is going wrong. Children have to be valued. Our society needs to be valued. Every soul needs to be valued for what they bring to the classroom, to the community. And therefore, I do believe that we need to have discussions in classes with rich literature and rich thoughts, be it whatever. Sex, obviously the sex education pieces, we know the biological piece can be talked about and dealt with in that manner. Again, you can, as mentioned before, parents can opt out if they don't want to participate in that realm. However, it is an important realm to understand in the future. So going forward, again, just making sure we hear one another in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the final question I have has to do with the portrait of Sonoma County, and which I know you all have read, and which was quite disturbing when we look at the educational chances for everyone. And I was really appalled by the fact that Black residents have the lowest rate of school enrollment, 69.3%. Latino have 77.1%. And Native American has quite high, 94.8. But what can you do? How will you address this inequity and raise the enrollment and the graduation rates for Latino, for African Americans, for Native Americans? Ron, I'll let you start.
As the county superintendent, you have to work with the local school districts because they're going to be the ones that are creating the curriculum and the support. So your job is to provide the supports to the local districts in that area. So we, as mentioned earlier, we know where the communities are in the portrait of Sonoma County, who needs to be addressed, and our resources need to go there and addressing them. We can set up, one of the great things about the county though, is we can think of upstream investment. We can think of 2 years of age to kindergarten, where we can actually put resources in place to work with families to begin that educational process. Because if children are accessing the curriculum when they hit first, second, third grade, then they can access more deep and rich curriculum when they hit high school and going forward. And they can make it through to any A through G course and make any decision they wish. But that being said, we also have students right now in the middle of this, and we need to address that. We need to provide the support classes that are out there. I know that, for example, A through G support classes up in Hillsburg High, they've raised it up to 71% of students going through A through G. We need to follow those models and put that into place so that we can have all students have access to any curriculum they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Amie, what would you like to say?
I think when schools are a place where we are comfortable, where we feel successful, we feel loved, we feel seen, that they are places that our young people want to be. And so I think this is a call for us to hold a mirror up to ourselves and really reflect on how we're doing as an agency to be inclusive of these young people. My son-in-law came over from Mexico when he was 14, and the way he described the American education system is he says, everything around me told me I did not belong there. And I think about that when I think about our schools and look at the statistics like this and enrollment disparities. I think it's beholden on us as educators and as an educational system to shift our practices. This is why I feel so strongly about hiring a diverse teacher pipeline. This is a space where the county office runs a teacher credentialing program. We have the opportunity to get those educators educated for free. We can help build teacher housing for them. But I think we've got to help create a vision in our young people's minds of successfulness. And that really means pulling in BIPOC leaders, BIPOC educators that have been successful and that can help students catch that vision. One of the most disruptive things that I did at Rancho Cotati High School was hiring 4 Latin counselors who spoke Spanish. And I think just having that alone, just having a counselor guide you through the curriculum system that speaks your language, that understands your culture, that's approachable for you and your family. These are the shifts that we have to make in order to create an environment that's inclusive. Another statistic there in that portrait of the graduate, it's Youth Truth, is that 44% of our students don't feel engaged in our classrooms. And we fall in the lowest quartile for the nation for student engagement here in Sonoma County. And I see those two data points as being very parallel. We have to make sure that there are courses and opportunities in a child's day every single day that gets them out of bed, gets them excited about being on campus, and really focuses on their assets and helps them feel seen and included.
Brad.
Thank you. I was really hoping we'd get to this question, so I appreciate it. This is an equity question, and for me, there just needs to be drastic change. As the county superintendent, I will tell you right now, drastic change is needed. We cannot have the status quo. That's the simplest answer I can give you. Now, let me give you some details. For our BIPOC students and BIPOC families, I took this issue head on when I was the principal at Santa Rosa High School. I talked to our students, I talked to our families, and I took a whole child philosophy where we not only asked the families and students what was going on at school, but what was going on at home and with their families. And we tried to break down those barriers. And once we knew what the barriers were, we could tackle them. And even though it wasn't perfect, I do want you to know, and I am very proud to say that we started to narrow the achievement gap in most areas, including attendance and grades and graduation rates while I was there. Another area incredibly important on this that doesn't get talked about a lot are our classified employees. And these are our secretaries, our office managers, our custodians, cafeteria, yard duties. We can't run our schools without our school employees, and yet the majority of them are women, and the majority of the women are BIPOC, and yet they are paid the very lowest wages in public education. Some of them not even minimum wage. And if they're earning minimum wage at $15 an hour, I think all of you know that's not even a living wage in Sonoma County. You can't survive on that. So this equity issue, it's a huge issue for me. I've personally taken it on by mentoring specifically BIPOC women, and I'm very proud and humbled to say that every single one is now a school administrator, district office, and even superintendent. So it's not something that I say that I will do. I've actually taken action on this issue. So I really appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you. This has been a wonderful forum. I'm sorry that we can't spend another hour or two. I know there are other questions that we haven't been able to answer for people. But could you put the emails that you want to have people write to in the chat, and I will make sure they get out in an email to everybody who's on the call right now. Because I don't know if the ones that I have would be the ones that you want them to write you to. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope that you got a lot out of this. I know it's going to be a difficult choice to make come June 7th. But I want to say more power to all of you, and thank you. I think whoever wins is going to be a great superintendent. So appreciate your time. And I'm turning off the recording now.